it? Awesome. So yes, I've been a recruiter for over 20 years, and one of the things, I'm going to start with just a little story. I started recruiting here in the Bay Area in 1998, June of 1998. And the very first candidate that I worked with, that I recruited, I was able to get him 3 interviews. And I was so excited. He seemed like a really qualified guy, and I just couldn't wait for him to do the interviews. I knew he was going to get a job. And the first 2 interviews, he totally bombed. I mean, bombed big time. When I talked to the managers after his interviews, they were like, yeah, and they gave me some feedback, and I just knew I had to help this guy. But I was a brand new recruiter. I didn't know what to do. And so I asked one of the most senior recruiters at my company what I should do to help this guy. And she put me on a task. It took me several days of reading through interview tips, watching interview tip movies, just preparing myself to know everything about the interview. And so I gathered all of this information, and I tried to consolidate it into a quick training that I could do with this guy. And so I brought him in, and I said, listen, you have one more interview. I really want to help you. Come in with me, with me for half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it's going to take, and I want to give you some interview tips. And he was my very first person that I practiced the interview tips with. And after the interview, the manager called me, and he said, hey, Anita, I wanted to let you know I want to hire your candidate. I was like, fantastic. And he said, he said something at the end of the interview that really made me know that this was the right guy for me. And the manager, almost word for word, repeated back what I had coached my candidate to say. And my heart was just filled with happiness and pride to know that the tips worked and the candidate got a job. And so I began my career as a recruiter, not only looking for jobs for people, not only recruiting people for jobs, but investing my time with each and every person I recruited to teach them how to interview properly. Although when I came here to NVIDIA, that changed. They told me I could not coach my candidates to get the job at NVIDIA. They needed to get it on their own. And so at that point, I no longer did interview tip training except with my friends. And so this training that you're going to get today, I feel is quite valuable. I haven't seen anything quite like this out there, and it was really a compilation. I don't even know all the places that I got the materials to put this together, because I had just immersed myself in the interview process for that time period and just put together something, kind of taking things from everything I heard. And I've gone through over time and adjusted them as well. And so that is going to be the on-site or the virtual on-site interview tips. I'm going to start with the phone interview tips, and I'm going to spend less time on the phone interview. So with the phone interview, and I will give Raghu the materials afterwards so he can send everyone a copy of the documents I put together for this, and then you guys can take this material, you can study it, you can make it your own, and you too can be a superstar at interviewing. So starting with the phone interview tips, I want to start with a couple of things. One of the things is that when you do a phone interview, the goal of your phone interview should actually be to give them enough information so that they move you on to the next stage. No one's going to hire you on a phone interview. You might end up having to do 2 phone interviews. A lot of times companies will do, especially if they're going to fly you out, they may do 2 or 3 phone interviews. But most companies will have at least 2 phone interviews. Some will have just 1 before they do the virtual on-site. They want to make sure that you have the right technical skills, that you are the person that you say on your resume, and that you're going to be able to do the job. So that's the purpose of the phone interview. It's really more to weed people out, to vet them a little bit. And so you want to prepare for your phone interview just like you would prepare for an on-site interview. So, and you want to do things that will kind of move that phone interview forward. So a couple of things. You want to answer your questions succinctly. You want to ask deep questions about the projects to show them that you're intelligent and you really see the bigger picture. Show them that you've done your homework on the role. Show them that you've studied the market a little bit. You want to find out what kinds of challenges they're facing. Write everything down that they're telling you, because this can also help you with your virtual on-site or your on-site, depending on where you are. Some people are meeting in person now and doing some interviews in person, and there's a good portion of the world right now that are still doing virtual on-sites through platforms like Zoom and Teams and WebEx, etc. So the other thing that you want to do is that you want to let them know at the end of the interview that the position is of high interest to you. Thank them. Let them know that you look forward to talking to them again in the future. This leaves the interviewer with a great feeling about who you are and about your interests. As a recruiter, I get to hear kind of both sides. I get to hear the candidate side. I get to hear the manager side. And I can't tell you how many times from both phone interviews and from virtual on-site or on-site interviews, a manager has told me, yeah, you know, he seems like a really good guy, or she seems like a really good girl for this job. Like, they have the skill, but I'm just not getting the feeling they're that interested. I'm going to pass on them. I'd rather have someone who's passionate about the role, even if they're not such a great fit. So you want, at every phase of your interview, you want to make sure that you thank them and let them know, wow, you know, I really enjoyed meeting with you today. This is the kind of position I'm looking for. Thank you so much for your time today. Ending interviews like this basically puts your best foot forward. So a couple of prep things. Be prepared with a pen and paper. You want to be able to take notes. You want to be able to write down questions when you have them so that you don't interrupt the speaker, so you can ask them at the end of the interview. Most interviews are designed where it's 80% the interviewer asking you questions and you responding, and 20% at the end, you asking them questions. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't ask questions while you're going, but you don't want to interrupt them with questions. Let them finish their sentence. Make sure you're using that pen and paper so that you can say, yeah, before I answer that, I did have a question, and then you can ask them the question. You want to make sure that you have your resume in front of you. It's good to print your resume. It's actually also good to just print the job description, or have a computer in front of you where you have the job description in front. And the reason being is because sometimes they may be asking something, or they may be reflecting on something, and you want to make sure that you're like clear about what the position is, what the responsibilities are, so that you can answer questions that actually relate to that role, and that you're not like answering questions that would relate to a different role. I've had more than one candidate go into an interview and they talk themselves right into the job, and then they talk themselves right back out. And I've had at least one manager tell me that that is exactly what happened. They said, yeah, you know, he was saying this and that, and I was excited. I was ready to hire the guy. And then he started off on a tangent and he started saying this and that. And you know, we're going to pass. And so you definitely want to make sure that you are focused and that your attention is there. That you're showing that you're listening, that you're showing that you understand what's being asked of you. You want to understand what your accomplishments are. Maybe even have a list of accomplishments in case they ask you. You don't need to throw around accomplishments here and there. Make sure that you're speaking relevantly for the position, but it's good to know, and it's good to keep track of exactly what you have done. You want to make sure that you've researched the company. When people come to NVIDIA and for an interview, or when they're on the phone for an interview, and the interviewer says, oh, yeah, so why are you interested in NVIDIA? And they say, well, I needed a job, and I saw the posting. I thought I would apply. That's not a great answer. It basically says, hey, I'm maybe a little desperate, maybe, but it's not showing that you're actually thinking about your career and thinking about the company that you're coming to. If you said something like, you know, I've been following the gaming or the autonomous vehicle market for a while, and I've been really watching where NVIDIA is going. And, you know, I have skills in ASIC design, verification, and in system architecture, and I would love to have the opportunity to move NVIDIA to the next step using these skills. And that's why I've applied, because I really respect the company, and I can't wait to be able to use my background to further the company and what you're up to. Something like that will show that you're actually interested and you've done your research, you've done your homework. Now, I just gave a very generic answer. You might have a more concise answer, a more precise answer that is even better than the answer I just gave, because you'll have known your background and you'll have known what the company is looking for and what they do. A short list of questions about the job is good to have in advance. Take a little bit of time, go through the job description, go through the website, look at what they're doing, write a couple of questions, 3 to 5 questions is what I usually recommend, so that you're prepared at the end of the interview, especially when they say, so do you have any questions for me? You don't want to say, and it's okay if you say it, but it's good to have at least a couple questions. You don't want to say, well, you answered all my questions in the interview, I have nothing. Because then it makes it look like you, even if it's really the truth, it makes it look like you're just not really like a thinker, and that you're not really looking at the future, or maybe you're not interested, and that's why you don't have questions. So it's good to ask at least a couple of questions. Have your calendar available. Now, at bigger companies, like let's say the NVIDIAs of the world, the Googles, the Microsofts, a lot of them have a scheduling team, a recruiting team, a sourcing team, and those teams work together to get candidates scheduled, and it's not the manager. But at some of the smaller companies or companies that don't have a really large HR department, sometimes it's the managers that do the scheduling, and sometimes if they're very excited about you, or they want to do a follow-up call with you, they may ask to schedule you right there. So you want to be prepared for that. Now, a couple of things. When you're on the phone, they cannot see you. However, close your eyes. I want you to listen. Close your eyes for just a second. And I want you to listen to see if you can hear my smile as I talk. If I'm talking and I'm smiling, can you hear that smile in my voice? Now, if I'm not talking with a smile, can you hear that? Which can you hear better? Can you hear the smile, or can you hear the not smile? So smiling when you're on the phone, now you can open your eyes again. How many of you heard me smile while your eyes were closed? Awesome, awesome. So the interviewers will hear you smile. They can't see you. But a smile will convey to them that you're someone who's easy to get along with. You're someone that might be a good culture fit. You're someone that they want to meet. When you don't have that smile reflected in your voice, you may come across as uninterested, cold, hard, things like that. And you don't want to come across that way. You would like to come across neutral to neutral warm. You don't want to be too crazy unless, and I say this with the caveat of unless the person on the other line has a higher energy level. In those cases, lift your energy level up to match theirs. It doesn't mean you need to be hyper or crazy or excited, but you should talk a little faster. You should ask questions. You should be more engaged. If you hear that that person is coming across on your call that way, try to reflect their style, because they're going to be able to hear you better when you're reflecting their style. It's not that you're not necessarily, it's not like you're copying them or mocking them. It's really like you're making yourself more approachable so that they can actually hear your words, that you don't have any distance between what you're saying. And if your style is so different than their style and you're using the same words, they may not be able to hear everything you're saying. It may come across as kind of almost like a headbutting or something like that. But being able to just listen, to take things in, and then reflect back the same energy definitely makes the interview go much more smoothly and has the interviewer feel much more excited about you. So do not smoke. Do not chew gum. Do not eat or drink anything. Now, you could have a glass of water and just let them know, oh, hold on, I just want to take a sip of water. Thank you so much for holding. Something like that is okay. You don't want your voice to get cracky and dry, but you don't want to have your conversation be interrupted by a bunch of slurping sounds, a bunch of noises, a bunch of things that are basically very unprofessional. Another thing that you want to do is you want to stand up for your interview. It's good to stand up. If you have a little counter, do your interview standing, or at the very least, sit up straight. Don't slouch. When we sit up straight, and I'm going to do that right now, when we sit up straight, our voice carries better. We're able to speak more clearly. And when we slouch, our voice starts to get, it doesn't carry as well, and we don't speak as clearly. And we may not even be as quick to think when we're slouched like this. It has a kind of a depressing attitude on the entire nervous system. And so you want to at least sit up straight or stand up. Another thing you want to make sure you're doing is to speak directly into the phone or use a headset so that they can hear you. The worst thing in an interview is when an interviewer is asking you questions and they cannot understand what you're saying. They can't hear you clearly. So do make sure that you are speaking directly into the phone and you're speaking as clearly as you can. This one is a big one for me. I tend to use a lot of filler words. I try not to, but when I get nervous, I end up using them. Try to keep your ums, ahs, ers, and hums to a minimum or eliminate them completely. A quiet moment of silence is actually better than an like I just did it, It's just, it will come across much better if you can keep those to a very minimum or eliminate them completely. Now, a couple of things that you can keep in mind for a phone interview. Confirm at the very beginning of the interview the caller's name. Confirm what company they're coming from, calling from. Hopefully, you have written that down when you made the calendar appointment, so you don't have to confirm that. But it is important, especially with the caller's name, because sometimes you're scheduled for one interview with an interview for one person, and that person changes. And so you want to make sure you write that down, especially when you're talking to them and you're on the phone. You can't see them. You don't see the name on the screen. It's good to be able to say, "Hi, Jim," or "Hey, Kalpana," or "Betsy, I had a question about this," or "Thank you, Deanna," or "Grace, that was such a great question. Let me see if I understand it correctly." Using their name in the interview will also help them feel more akin or close or connected to you. So it's good to have a name. Plus, in your follow-ups or in future chats with other people, knowing who you talked to and how the interview went is a good thing as well, because sometimes people will reference that. "Hey, well, you know, when you talked to Jim, how did that go? What did you think? He mentioned to me that he talked to you about XYZ. What did you think about that?" So that comes up in interviews, and it's good to be prepared for those types of scenarios. Be aware that the caller cannot see your hands. A lot of people, I personally am one of them, talk with their hands, and they try to communicate with their hands. Your caller cannot see any of that, so make sure that your words are also speaking what you need to speak. Pace the call. Make sure that you're allowing them to do most of the talking, that you're not interrupting. Make sure that you repeat questions or phrases, especially if you have a question. This is another thing as a recruiter. I will have managers and also team leads come back and say, "I asked this and they answered that. I don't even know if they were listening to me. They are not a fit for this job. We really need someone who understands the questions and can answer the question asked." It reflects back to who you are as a person, and if you're going to actually follow through on your commitments. If they give you a task, are you going to follow through, or are you going to go off and do your own thing? If they give you directions, are you going to be able to follow those directions on how to execute something? Or are you going to just try to wing it with, you know, as the saying goes, a wing and a prayer? Are you going to try to just fly by the seat of your pants? So you want to make sure that you are understanding the question before you answer it. And if there's any question whatsoever, make sure you ask. Just say, "Hey, you know, I didn't understand what you meant about this. So you're asking me this and that. do you want me to also include this? I don't have specific questions right here. This is more of a general way of layering down so that you're answering correctly. You want to make sure that you don't give simple yes and no answers. If they ask a yes and no question, you could say, yes, I've done that before. Did you want me to go into some detail about that? This way you show that there is more there to you. It's not just, you're not just a yes, no, you know, and at the end of the day, they're like, I don't even remember what we talked about, and they throw your resume into the circular file. That's the last thing you want to do. And by the way, if you realize during the interview that you aren't interested in the role, it's okay to keep interviewing, because it gives you practice so that when you have a role that you are interested in, that you can actually have that practice behind your belt and you can go out and you can do very well. And in fact, I've had more than one candidate come back to me and tell me, you know, I've given it some thought. I thought I wasn't interested in this role, but I really am. And I did some more research and I talked to my friends, and can you get me the job? And I'll go back to the team and I'll say, hey, you know, I know you said that the candidate didn't seem interested. Let me give you some feedback. But they got so turned off because in the interview, they felt that lack of interest, and they had already decided to pass, and there was nothing I could do to change their mind, whether they were qualified or not. So make sure that you never, that you don't burn your bridges. And every bridge, I would say, keep it open. It's better to have offers that you say no to than to have no offers at all. If you need time to think, say so. Say, oh, wow, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about that before. Let me think about that for a second. Or, you know, I haven't really done that for a little while. Let me give that a little bit of consideration so I can tell you how I would really go about doing X, Y, and Z. A couple of things that people ask me about a lot are, especially around compensation. I should let you know that on phone screens, most phone screens will not, there will be no discussion of compensation, except when you're dealing with either a small company or HR or a manager who has not been instructed yet that they are not the ones to ask the salary questions. So in some cases, I do get feedback and a manager will tell me, oh yeah, blah, 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 and I asked about their salary, and I will let them know immediately, oh yes, you know what, the recruiter asked about the salary, please leave that to me in the future. So, but smaller companies, they will ask about it. It depends on how their HR is run, but at the bigger companies, they usually don't. A couple of good answers that you can say. One of the things that you can say is, you know, I'm still giving it a little bit of thought, but I can say I'm looking for market rates for my skill set. You don't have to give an exact number, but if you know a number, you could give the number. A rule of thumb on what you should expect, usually 8% of what your current compensation is a good rule of thumb. If you're a superstar and you're doing really well, or you haven't really gotten a lot of advancements for a while, and you've done some market research and you see the market is higher, you could request 10 to 15% above. But I will tell you that having unrealistic expectations is one of the biggest ways to get declined by even the best companies, and especially the best companies. For instance, I had a candidate a couple of weeks ago tell me, you know, they said, well, I'm looking for a TC. TC, by the way, is total comp. I'm looking for a TC of $525,000 a year. The guy had a bachelor's degree and 7 years of experience. For his experience and his degree, and even for all the companies he's worked for, his TC should have been somewhere more in the neighborhood of like $225,000 to $275,000. He was like out there, and he was somebody that I was not fortunately, but he did end up being non-responsive when I tried to answer his question. He emailed that question and then was non-responsive for the answer, because I was going to tell him that if that was really his expectation, that he was really off the mark as far as what the market was for his background, and that we would have to pass. So make sure that your expectations are within the market range. If you happen to be a superstar, I would just say, I would like to discuss that later on in the interview. I really want to see if this is the right opportunity for me. And I am looking for market rates, but we can discuss further, once I've interviewed with your company. That's another great answer. So you want to, as far as the questions go, again, as I mentioned, ask great questions. I would say 3 to 5 questions. You want to ask about the role. You want to ask about the team. You want to ask about the company. You can ask questions like, what are the biggest challenges your team is facing? What gaps is this position, if you fill this position? What gaps will it fill? How does this role impact what the company is doing and the product definition, or questions that are going to relate directly to what you're doing. Tell me, what do you like best about your team? What's your favorite thing about the company? Why do you like working at X, Y, and Z? Why do you like working at NVIDIA? Tell me more about that. So those are some good questions that you can ask during the phone screen. And again, at the very end of the phone screen, just thank them for their time and let them know you're looking forward to next steps. Thank you so much for meeting with me today, Jim. I really enjoyed talking to you. This is the kind of opportunity I've been looking for, and I look forward to next steps with you. And say it with a smile. All right, so those are the phone interview tips. Now we're going to change a little pace here, and we're going to go to the virtual on-site tips, and I just call them, I think I just call them tips for successful interviewing. And these are the tips that I would say out of everything, these are the golden tips. So, let's see, let's start with this, honesty. It is so important that you are honest about your background. But that said, and honest about your skills, but that said, you want to be confident as well. So with everything that you answer, and I should actually go back one step. Honesty should be reflected in your resume. There are so many resumes I look at that are just like puffed up. They have every technology under the sun, and there's no way that interviewer knows all of that tech. And it's almost like a desperation move where everything that they've ever even touched, they stick on the resume. But then when somebody is actually looking for that skill and they ask them about it, they crash and burn. What should be on your resume is stuff that you can actually talk about. Now, when it comes to stuff lower in your resume, maybe you don't have that in the summary of skills. Maybe if you used, let's see, I'm trying to think of more of a programming language, for instance, is no longer used anymore. I can't think of one at this moment, but maybe in the past you did a lot of scripting and now you're working on Java and C++. Maybe you don't have the scripting stuff if you can't answer scripting questions in the summary of your skills of your resume, but you have it in one of those older jobs. And if they ask you and it was in the job previously, you can just say, it's been about 7 years since I scripted. I would have no problem doing it again. I can't really answer technical questions because I've been deep into Java programming and C++ programming, but it's not something that would be hard for me to pick up. It's something that's fairly easy for me. And I would say back in the day, my best scripting skills were XYZ, Perl, Tickle, and whatever, Python, Perl and Python are sometimes considered scripting languages, and sometimes people consider them mainstream languages. So, but Tickle is definitely a scripting language. So maybe you say, that's your best skill, or shell scripting, something like that. So make sure that you're being honest. That's very, very important. Even when you're doing a virtual interview and you're meeting people over a computer in a similar platform as what we're doing right here, it's important that you take a shower, brush your teeth, make sure you look good, dress professionally, have your appearance be good. They can't smell you through the phone, but you can smell you, and you're going to do a much better job if you're fully prepared as if you were going on site. And then definitely if you go on site, make sure you do all of those things. It is very distracting. I can tell you from personal experience, being in an interview and having the person that you're interviewing smell so bad that the interview room is just hard to be with. It makes you think, wow, do I really want this person at the company? If this is how they smell on a good day, how do they smell when they don't have interviews? So definitely hygiene is extremely important. But even if you're just on a Zoom call and you're doing your virtual on-site in person on a Zoom call, do make sure that you are prepared just as if you were going in for a regular interview. And regarding how you dress better than you would dress, than the interviewer would dress. Every so often I have an interviewer and I'm just surprised. I know that we're very casual in these days, that everyone's working from home, but when I see people dressed basically in sweatpants and their hair isn't even brushed and they don't look put together at all, it kind of concerns me, like, what is the quality of their work going to be? And if I have that concern as an HR person, you know that will come up in the minds of other people as well. So definitely make sure that you are visually and just like overall prepared. And for instance, before having this meeting, this isn't an interview, but I went over, and you guys cannot see my teeth that closely and do not know how I smell or whatever, but I went over and I went ahead and got dressed up and kind of fixed my hair, brushed my teeth, got ready, and I treated it just like I would treat an interview. Be succinct, but offer more detail. You want to make sure that you aren't so brief that they think you have no depth, but you also want to make sure that you don't ramble on and on and on. And so how do you be succinct but offer more detail? You might say something like, well, when I worked at Amazon, I did this, this, and this. And you asked me about my skills here. I did this and this. Would you like me to go into detail about any of those projects or any of that work? And let them say, oh yeah, I would like you to go into more detail. Tell me about this. So let them be the one that have you go deeper, but make sure that they know that there's something more there. It hurts my heart when I read feedback and they say that they just couldn't seem to even go into depth about anything. Be prepared before the interview. Study your resume. Study the job description. Study the company. And make sure that everything on your resume, that you've refreshed yourself enough that you're able to talk succinctly and still be able to go deep, okay? Body language. Now, this is one that we don't have to worry about so much, but it's one of my favorite ones, and that is a handshake. There is so much in a handshake. A handshake will tell the world about a person. And so if you're actually in an interview in person, then this is one of the things that you want to do is practice with a friend. Practice with people with different kinds of hands. Your handshake, when you go to do it's hard to give myself a shaking of a hand, but when you go to shake someone's hand, this part of your hand should meet. Your hand should go around theirs. And you want some people's hands, when you squeeze them, they kind of collapse right here. And other people's hands have very like a solid structure. So you want to give them a little bit of a squeeze, and then depending on how strong their hand is, you can give it a little more of a squeeze. What you don't want to do is you don't want to do this limp, floppy, fishy handshake. The limp fish handshake it gives people the heebie-jeebies. People don't like to do limp fish handshakes. Now, some people don't even realize that's the kind of handshake they are doing, and your interviewer may have that kind of handshake. Grant them grace. Don't be upset about their handshake. You're the one that is interviewing for the job, not them. And, again, just practice so that handshake is warm, firm, but not overbearing. You don't want to crush the hand. Eye contact. Eye contact is something you definitely want to do. Now, in an in-person interview, I recommend that people have a notepad and they have a pen and paper, and that they break the eye contact by looking down, making a note, looking back up. Make sure that you look the person in the eye. Some interviewers aren't going to be comfortable with that. And so if they aren't, that's fine. Look down at your paper, look up. Look down at your paper, look up. Give them a little bit of a break, but make sure that your eye contact is there. It shows trustworthiness. It shows that you're paying attention. With the eye contact, another thing is that you don't want to be like staring off like this into space. When you're on a virtual interview, you can basically look at the camera every so often. If you see that they're looking at you and you're answering a question, just look at your camera for a second. Don't be looking like all over the place. Let them know that you're actually listening. And some people's cameras are completely in a different place. And you may want to position the camera so that you can have the camera right above your computer screen, so that when you're looking at your computer screen, you're looking at the interviewer, it appears that you're actually looking at them and you're not somewhere else. And that would be it's a little harder on these virtual interviews to have the greatest eye contact, but having eye contact is still important. Posture. In your virtual onsite, on your phone interview, they can hear that posture. In the virtual onsite, they're going to be able to see it. So every so often, sit up straight. If you can see how they're sitting, sit in a similar way that they do. There's something that I usually talk about, especially for in-person interviews. It's called mirroring, and I discussed it just a tiny bit in the phone interview. In an on-site interview, it's even more important. If you think about the last time you were in a board meeting, or maybe the last time you were in an in-person Toastmasters meeting, and if one person coughs, you'll see that the rest of the room will start to clear their throat, give a little cough. If one person yawns, it kind of spreads. Not every single person does it. If one person shifts and they cross one leg, you'll see it almost like a domino effect. And people do, they mirror their environment naturally when they're comfortable. But in interviews, people forget to be natural. They're a little nervous, and so they sit there and they're very stiff, and they're not approachable. And what you want to do to I would say combat that, or to alleviate that problem that people get when they're nervous, is to just pay attention to your interviewer. And if you see that they shift, in a moment or two, you could shift. If there's somebody who sits close on the desk and they're like kind of sitting up close to you, maybe you sit close. If they sit farther back and they're crossing their legs, and you can see that I'm doing all of that while I talk to you, you want to mirror them. They're going to feel more comfortable, and you're actually going to feel more comfortable yourself if you're being more natural, the way you would be, like on I was going to say on a date, but actually this, finding a job is very similar to dating, and, dating with the intention to get married. So mirroring actually works there as well, and it helps you really connect with that person. So finding a job, when you mirror people, it allows them to feel comfortable with you. You want to walk confidently. You want to stand straight. You want to sit straight. The confidence is going to be seen everywhere. When you introduce yourself at the very beginning, it might be to the manager, it might be to someone else, the interviewer, whoever the interviewer is, just greet them with, "Hi, I've been looking forward to meeting you. Thanks for taking the time to interview." And say it with a smile. And it will make them feel very good, very happy, and it will basically break the ice for that interview. Now, some interviewers, they ask this horrible question. It is the worst question. If you are a manager on this call, do not ask this question, because it puts people in a bad position. They're not really sure what they should say. So if someone asks you this question, tell me about yourself. You don't want to answer it. Don't answer it first. What you want to do is you want to ask a question back. "I would love to. Where would you like me to begin?" And when you ask that question, they can direct you to what they're really looking for. Usually when an interviewer asks you, "Tell me about yourself," they may be thinking one of two things, or one of a couple things. Maybe they want to know what your hobbies are. Maybe they want to know what you do for fun. Maybe they want to know about your last job. Maybe they want to know about 3 jobs before, and they're just hoping you bring it up. So you want to find out what they want to know. And you could even say, "Where would you like me to begin? Would you like me to begin with my professional background, or were you curious to know what some of my hobbies and interests are?" And say it with a smile, and in a really soft and relaxed way. You don't want to say it very aggressively or combatively. You want it to just be like, "Yeah, I'd love to. Where do you want me to begin? And then again, if you wanted to ask a little more, professional or personal. So the next question, the next thing that is going to happen, usually in an interview, is that they're going to ask you questions about your positions. And usually they go chronologically with the most current role, and then they go backwards. And so it's good, knowing that in advance, it's good for you to actually think about your job chronologically and think about it in terms of what does the interview want to know from you. So here's a couple of areas that you can look at. What was the product or industry? And especially if it was a product and industry that is it related, or if it's not related to the interview that you're doing, but you could find some similarities, you could always say, this is what our company does. It's not exactly what you guys do, but, I've been doing a little research, and these are some of the similarities. You can talk about your role in the group. Were you a lead? Were you an individual contributor? Were you a manager? And then you want to talk about your tasks. And here is where you want to be very specific. Some people have the habit of saying, we did this, the team did that, we did, and they everything is about we, the team this, the team that, and they are not interviewing the team. They are interviewing you, and they want to know about you. Please do not, whatever you do not use we language and team language. You could talk about what the team did as a whole only if you also talk about what your specific contributions were. I achieved this, I delivered that, I drove this, I generated that, I increased this. Similar, for those of you who are on the Toastmasters meeting last month, I mentioned, I shared some resume tips, and I hopefully Raghu sent them out to you. In those tips, I talked about using action words or using action verbs or power words. It's the same when you're talking. You want to make sure that you express things in terms of action. So you want to start with the action words. What did you do? I decreased, I reduced, I saved, I created, I restructured, I accelerated, I established, I trained, I transformed. Then you want to talk about the tools. So what tools did you use to do it with? What were your software tools? What were your hardware tools? If you're not an engineer, maybe you're a front desk person. Do you use Excel? Do you use, how strong are your Excel skills? Can you make tables? If you're, I'm trying to think of some other industries, if you're doing, like a telephone call center, what platforms have you used? What platforms are you familiar with? So you want to mention these while you're talking about what you've done. When you're using those verbs, you follow those verbs with some of the tools that you use to accomplish it. Then the next thing you want to do is talk about results. Mention a couple of results. Have those in mind. While you were there, you released 5 products, and this is how they did in the market. Any accomplishments. What about release and life cycle? If it's relevant. So some jobs don't have release life cycle stuff, you don't need to worry about it. But if you worked on a product, it went to market, you worked on a product that had a release, you worked on a product that is impacting some other people, you can talk about it. This is what happened with our product. And it's always good to have at least 1 to 2 situational questions where you are prepared to talk about a challenge you faced. And I would say a challenge with the role is one area you want to be prepared in, and a challenge with people. So those are the 2 areas that people will usually ask you about challenges that you face and how did you overcome them. Sometimes they want to know about, like, did you ever have a confrontation and a problem within a group? How did you solve that? And be prepared to go step by step some of the steps that you took to solve that challenge. Now, in almost every interview, especially if you're looking for a role that, let's say, is kind of a stretch role. Maybe it's slightly different than the role you're doing right now. Maybe it's in a new technical field. Maybe it's maybe it's the next step. Maybe you've been a team lead and now you're stretched. Well, maybe not for management, but maybe it, like program management. Maybe there's some tools you haven't used and they ask you about this. Any kind of technical weakness that you have, you want to make sure that you cover. And and Raghu will send this out. There's a couple things in the document that I'm going to give you, and they're highlighted in blue. Everything highlighted in blue, I want you to commit to memory, and I want you to be able to say them as if you were the author, as if it came from you, not as if I gave these tips to you. And this is one of them. So if someone says, tell me about your experience in here, or they say, oh, I see you don't have any experience in this. You can say, you're right, I really don't have any professional experience in that area. However, I have read about it, I've studied it, and I have a pretty good understanding of it. And this is something that I would love the opportunity to do. If this is something that was important to this position, I would be more than happy to take classes, to work extra hours, or do whatever I could to bring myself up to speed. That's it. You don't need to say anything else. And that was the question. That was the answer that the manager, when the manager asked the candidate something and he gave that answer, the manager was so impressed that that was the one thing that stuck out in his mind when he called me to say he wanted to give my first candidate an offer. And I was so proud of my candidate because the manager said it word for word, so I knew my candidate had said it word for word. He had rehearsed it like I had asked him to, and it had become his own. And when he responded, it came out naturally and sincerely, and it came from him. And you can modify it just a little bit. For instance, if you have some experience, but you don't have a lot of experience, or maybe you have a similar experience. So for instance, if you're a C++ programmer and you want to go into Java programming, this is a great thing. I don't have any professional experience with with Java programming. However, I have a very strong background in C++ programming, and I've read about Java programming. I've done a little bit of studying, and I feel like I have a good understanding of object-oriented programming overall. I would love the opportunity to do Java programming. If it was something that was important to this position, I would take classes, read books, do whatever I could to bring myself up to speed. And you say that, and people no longer think of it as a technical weakness. They think of it as, wow, this person is a go-getter, and they're going to go out and they're going to do the job, and I feel confident that I can give them any task with that kind of enthusiasm and that kind of commitment and dedication. Now, at the end of the interview, this is your opportunity to really shine. Usually you're going to get about 5 or 10 minutes at the very end of the interview where you can ask a couple of questions yourself. So I want to give you a little bit of coaching on that. So first of all, you want to ask 3 to 5 questions. You want to ask 2 to 3 questions about the position. Maybe it's about the position and that group and what that group is doing. It's related to what you're going to be doing on that team. And then you want to ask 1 or 2 questions about the company or the market. And then you want to ask just 1 question about culture. And I'll give you a couple of examples. But you always, no matter what you ask, even if this is the only question you ask, you want to ask the $1 million question, okay? And actually, I'm just going to give you a spot quiz right now for those of you who were in the last chat. What is the $1 million question? Does anyone remember? Yes, Namita.
Yeah, so where do you see me fitting in your team or organization?
Close. Yes, and close. So even making it more simple. So instead of where do you see me fitting in, I would say, how do you see me fitting in? Because then that leaves it open even more. I apologize. My dog is going crazy. Let me just make sure it's like an Amazon delivery and not someone, yep, it is. Okay, not someone waiting at my door unexpectedly. I did not have any plans for today for visitors, so we'll just let that go. Okay, so how do you see me fitting in? That's the $1 million question. Now, that is the last question. Let me go through a couple questions before you get to that question, and then we'll talk about that question a little more. And for those of you who were in the last chat, you'll get a refresh on it. So, some questions about the team. What are the day-to-day responsibilities in this job? What is the biggest technical challenge you're facing right now? What kind of work can I expect to be doing in the first 6 months or the first year? How do you hope that this new hire impacts the organization? And then about the company, what is the organization's plan for the next 5 years? And how does this department fit in? And you'll want to use, I'm using very generic words. You're not going to want to say organization. Let's say you're interviewing at Microsoft. You might say, how do you hope that the hire for this position impacts Microsoft? What do you see this person being able to do that will take Microsoft to the next level? Things like that, just showing that you're really looking not only at the role, but also what impact are you going to have on the organization if you're hired there. So then you want to ask some company questions. What are some of the major short-range and long-range company objectives? And I would ask this of managers. I wouldn't ask this of an individual contributor. So individual contributors, you're going to ask questions about the role, about what they're doing, and about why they like working here. Managers, you're going to want to see a bigger picture. Who are the biggest competitors, and how will I be able to impact us in that competition? What markets do you cover? And some of this stuff you should actually research. So you should be able to dig a little deeper. So let's just say that your market is the cloud. So, who are Amazon's biggest competitors? They seem like they're number one in the area right now. Do you have other competitors that you really worry about? And how do you manage that competition? One or two. You don't want it to be all about the company. You really want it to be about the role, but you want to show that you're a big thinker too. And Betsy, would you be able to just write, we're almost done. If you could write your question down, I will call on you first when I get done. And you can leave your hand raised just so I don't forget you and call on somebody else if you'd like. And then asking questions. So if you really want to find out what the manager expects, here's a question that is great to ask a manager, and not of a team member, but the manager. What makes people successful here? So when you ask the question, what makes people successful here, they are going to tell you everything that they know. If you have that skill or that mindset, these are their superstars. Take note of what their superstars are doing. You want to be a superstar. That's how you get promoted. That's how you go places, become a mover and a shaker. You could even say something a little more generic. What is the common denominator of successful employees? Or you could say, can you describe an ideal employee? Or you could say, what are some of the characteristics the company feels are attractive? Or what are some of the this was actually, I just realized that this is, I'm going to take that question out. Forget that one, we're going to do a different one. Here's one for everybody, whether it's the team or a manager. Why do you like working here? What do you like best about your team? Why do you like working here? What makes you most excited about your company? Anything in those range. You don't have to do exactly my questions. It can be any of those questions that kind of fit that area. And then you follow the last question that you ask is the $1 million question. How do you see me fitting in? This is the question that, especially if they were on the fence in their mind, they're going to be thinking about you a little more. Maybe you had a technical weakness. Maybe you had an area that they haven't even talked to you about yet, and you don't even know. This is the question that is going to both help you in your next interview. It's going to help you know where you stand, and even if you get no answer, let's just say they answer you and say, well, we'll let you know. I need to meet with the team and I'll get back to you. When you ask, how do you see me fitting in? What the person does for half a minute, sometimes more, they actually see you in that job. They see you as a colleague. They see you as one of their employees reporting to them. And they will, and in taking that moment to actually imagine you in that job, and then they might say, well, you have some really great strengths with this, this, and this, but I'm a little concerned that you don't have this because it's something that I need for the role. And at that point, if you haven't already used your how to overcome technical weaknesses, wow, yeah, you know, that's actually one of the reasons I applied for this job. I know I don't have that experience. That's one of the areas I'm very excited about. I've read about it a little bit, and I would love the opportunity to work with it. And in fact, I would be willing to work extra hours, read books, take classes, or do whatever I can to bring myself up to speed. And now you were I'm not sure, this person doesn't have what I need. And now you go from being that to being, I think I might like them. It changes that thumb from a maybe, not sure, yes, no, to, oh, okay, this person has what it takes. So that's the value of how do you see me fitting in, is that it has the person think about you, and it gives you an opportunity, a last chance to answer technical weaknesses if you have them. And also solidifies for that person so that your resume doesn't immediately go into that circular file. It solidifies in their minds why they actually do want to move forward with you if that is the case. So, you know, definitely a good question to ask. And I would ask that of every single person, not just the manager. And then ending an interview. Just like the phone interview, you want to end the interview. And this one I will suggest that you just memorize. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. This is the kind of opportunity I've been looking for, and I think I would make a valuable contribution. I look forward to the next time we meet. Saying it with a smile, saying it with enthusiasm, you know, being sincere about it. You've now left that interview, every single interviewer, with a very good feeling about you, and they'll be excited. Now, sometimes with Zoom interviews, you have one person coming and another person leaving. You may say it just a little shorter. Hey, you know, thank you so much for meeting with me today. I had a great interview with you. I'm really excited to talk to you again. You know, I'm really looking forward to working at NVIDIA. Something quick, and then you go on to the next interviewer, and they're both there. And then they both heard your excitement, and then the next person you can just say, you know, thank you so much. I really appreciated you answering these questions, and this really confirmed for me that this is the kind of opportunity I'm looking for. So if they heard you say it to one person, and you're going to say it again, you can change it up just a little bit. But it's good to actually have that embedded in your heart and soul so that it comes out naturally and doesn't come out as a canned response. Now, a special note for, and Deanna, just like I mentioned to Betsy, just give me, this is the last thing, and then I'm going to open this up for questions. And I hope, I just looked at the time. I'm so sorry. I hope it's okay that we're still going. It's 7:38 on in my time here. Do I still have a couple of more minutes?
Yeah, it's scheduled for 1.5 hours. Anita, you can continue.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Raghu. Okay. When you're a manager and you're interviewing for a management role, you want to have different questions. And I can just give you a couple of examples, but these are areas that for every interview and for every job, it's good to write down some of these questions ahead of time. So what are some of the questions that you can ask if you're going into a management interview? You could ask things like, what are some of the outside influences that affect the company's growth? What areas does the company excel at, and what areas does it have limitations in? And you can also ask about the org. You know, tell me about some of the challenges that this organization is facing. Where are you technically? You know, how is the culture right now? Are there any things that need to be turned around? You know, what is the biggest thing that you want this manager to accomplish in the team over the next year? What about the next 5 years? You could also say, what would you add or subtract from the last person's performance? And then you'll hear about some of the good things and some of the bad things, some of the areas that you can take on. So that is the interview tips. And I'm going to now open up for questions. And I told Betsy I would start with her. Are you still, there you are, Betsy. What's your question? Or do you still have a question? Okay, Betsy, you can take yourself off mute if you want. Oh, you don't have a question? Okay. Then Deanna, do you want to put your question in the chat? I'll look for it while I answer Jim. Off mute.
Okay, thank you very much. I wanted to know if you could talk about thank you letters after the interview, because I've heard, I work in the legal field, I work in a law office, and I happen to be my office's equal opportunity officer. And I talked to the office manager who does most of the interviewing, and she said, I'm so surprised that it's so rare for a candidate to write a thank you letter. It's almost like a lost art. What's been your experience in that regard?
It really is. It really is. And I actually think thank you letters are wonderful. They're awesome. And one of the things that you could do, so you can always send your coordinator or your recruiter the thank you letter and ask them to pass it on, and usually they will. But you can ask the person in the interview, hey, can I get your email in case I have any other questions I can follow up with? And usually they'll give you the email, and then at the very least, you just send them a quick thank you letter. And I would say send them that evening or the next day, no later than that. The same day is good, okay? And it's very similar with a thank you letter, kind of like closing your interview with a thank you. But with a thank you letter, it's good to add something personal. So hopefully you've been taking a few notes and you can say, hey, you know, I really, when you talked about this and that, it really spoke to me. Thank you so much for letting me know that that was something that your company does, or just, you know, something personal that is not just a canned response. Right. Those letters actually make a bigger difference than just having a thank you, I appreciate the time. You want to say all that, but having one sentence that is personal, or one sentence, hey, when you said this, you know, thank you so much for meeting with me today. I really enjoyed meeting with you and hearing all about it. You said something that I've been thinking about ever since you said, and I had another question. You know, something like that. Right. Is also great. Yeah. And thank you. And it is a lost art. I interview a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people, and I would say I probably get less than 1%, maybe 5% thank you notes at the most, I'd say. So, Deanna, did you put it in the chat? Okay, let me just read this. I felt very nervous in my stomach in the interview. Looks good with eye contact in the suit jacket, like a suit jacket. Okay. I feel inside good, gloomy, outside looking with smiles. Yes, definitely. You want to make sure some of the techniques that you can use in an interview so that you can come across better is actually breathing, smiling, and just focusing on kind of like calming yourself down will help, even if you are nervous, even if you are like, I'm not really sure. Oh no, I'm botching it. And you know what? There is nothing wrong with starting the interview out and saying, hey, you know, I'm a little nervous today. I hope I don't stumble over my words. Sometimes I do when I'm nervous. I'm just so excited about this role, and I just wanted to let you know up front I'm excited and I'm a little nervous. So I hope you forgive me if I stumble. And that puts your interviewers like, oh yeah, no worries. And they actually, that's an icebreaker as well. That will help them feel like more connected to you. And it's almost like you've put them on your side if you start with something like that, if you actually are nervous. So great question, Deanna. All right, and Namita, I know you've had your hand raised for just a little bit, so sorry it took me so long to get to you. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
It's totally fine. So, see, while interviewing for a product-based company like Apple or Google, that interview is so different than from a service-based company like, say, Tata Consultancy Services or Oracle or Accenture, if you know what I mean. The interview experience is way too different. The questions, the format is totally different in a product-based company and in a service-based company. So what are your tips for a person who is working in, say, product-based, service-based company and is trying for, you know, such companies like Google or Microsoft or Apple and all?
Right. And those are kind of transition type of jobs, right? You want to transition from one industry one focus to another. So the thing that you want to do is you want to look for the similarities between your role and the role that you're going into. The interview, the tips that I'm giving you should be good for any kind of interview. It doesn't matter what kind of company. There are universal tips that will help you. But your approach to the interview is really more about your mindset. It's really more about doing your homework and understanding what are your weaknesses going to be and being able to speak to those weaknesses. So let's say you're going into you're at a product-based company and you want to go into a service company and you don't have any experience interfacing with customers. You could say, you know what, you're correct. I do not have any experience interfacing with customers. However, when I was in college, I led projects, and one of my favorite things was going out and, researching and working with different people and trying to figure out what things would work for what, and those types of things. And this is something, I haven't met with customers before, but it's something that I feel I could do well. I might need a little bit of training, but I'm very excited about it. And, here, Toastmasters, any kind of extracurricular activities that you've done, whether it's on your resume or not, you can bring it up. Some of the things that some people want to go, they've never worked at a robotics company, for instance. Maybe they've only worked at a systems company or a hardware or a software company, but maybe they've been developing robotics at home on the side. That's something that you would bring up. I know I've never worked at a robotics company. I really appreciate the opportunity that you've given me to talk. I wanted to let you know I've actually been working on robotics on the side because I'm so passionate about it for the last 5 years. And this is something that I can't wait to dive into. So basically knowing what the gaps are and then being able to speak to the gaps. You want to speak to the gaps. If you sense that there's any gap that you're coming up against, speak to it right there, bring it up. Bring it up. If they ask you something and you know right away that it's a gap, you could say, yeah, I don't have any experience in that. However, and then you'll use the technical weakness response that you'll get from Raghu when he sends out my tips. Okay? Did that answer your question? Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Grace.
Yes, you mentioned about the question, the after interview questions.
Grace, can you put your camera down so I can?
In like
Grace?
giving it during the initial screening or the.
Can you put your camera down so I can see your face a little better? I'm having a hard time hearing you, and it will help me connect. And by the way, in an interview, do not have your camera where only part of your face is showing. Make sure your whole face can be seen. Okay, can you ask that again? And now I can see you. Maybe I can understand you better.
Okay, sounds good. My question is.
Oh, that's a picture, isn't it? Okay.
When people are asking about
Grace, Grace, the connection is bad.
About after interview question, is there a difference when you're giving questions that you've mentioned when to give that during the phone interview? Okay, can I just?
I was having here, yeah. I was just saying, can you type it? So anything I can do that like the resume? I'm not sure I understand. Can you ask your question just a little more, Grace, so I can understand it better? I just want to make sure I'm answering the right thing. Okay. So Grace's question. My question about the interview, what would be the best questions to ask during the initial interview? So when you're doing the phone screen. So I would keep the phone screen questions more about the role. one of the best questions you can ask, and you can ask every single interviewer, what are the biggest technical challenges you see? Or what are the biggest challenges you see in this position? What would be the most important things that you want to that you want this person to come in and be able to do, or to accomplish, or to solve? Questions like that in the phone interview will help prepare you for the on-site interview or the virtual on-site interview. So it gives you kind of a heads up of what is important. You definitely want to use that phone interview time to be able to gather all the data that you can gather to make your virtual on-site or your on-site interview more powerful. Okay, did that answer it? And I'll, in the phone screen tips, I don't have questions written there. Hold on. Thank you for holding. I don't have questions in my phone screen tips specifically, but I do have them in the other document, and you can use those same questions. And then reading through the job description and really like trying to get an idea about what they're looking for will help you come up with your own questions as well. Okay, Deanna? Did you want to type your question, Deanna?
Awesome. I still have my question.
Okay, Dusty, I wasn't sure because it sounded like you didn't have one earlier, and I was going to ask you if your hand was actually.
I wasn't able to get off unmute. The host muted everybody, and I couldn't unmute, so I couldn't answer your question.
Okay, what's your question?
So I work for a fairly large company. There are about 900 people. I've interviewed internally. They are more concerned about behavior-based questions than technical-based questions. And I have all the technical background for the most part, but it's, tell me about a time when, what would you do if, here's a scenario, and those are the ones I get stumped on. And I've been
that's a really,
I've been told not to use my Toastmasters examples because they want something that's relatable to something that they are going to know.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a really great question. So one of the things that I do before I go into an interview is I actually research like what kinds of questions are people asking, and so you can just Google behavior-based questions, and then spend some time thinking about it, and spend some time actually like developing a response. And so you're not going to give like a canned response. You don't want it to sound like you're just like reading reading or something, but you do want to make sure that you, especially if you know that you're going to get behavior-based questions, you want to make sure that you do prepare yourself a little bit. So I find that the best way for me to prepare is to Google some of the kinds of questions that people are asking, and then see if I can answer them. And then look in my life, look at my job, look at the last 5 years at different jobs, what could you say? So behavior-based questions, you could look at your interactions with other teams, your interactions with other people, your interactions when you're trying to complete a project, any of the highlights, like the good parts, but also every time that you've ever had like something, let's say it falls apart, like it's just not going the right way, but then you're able to turn it around. Look at all of those, and that's where you're going to find the, we'll call it the fodder for your answers. But just knowing what the questions are ahead of time and then preparing and thinking about it ahead of time will help you a ton in that area.
Thank you.
Did that help?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to sign off. It's late here, so but thank you for sharing.
Well, it was wonderful. It was wonderful to have you, Betsy, and we'll look forward to perhaps seeing you again. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Good night, everybody.
All right. So let me see. Deanna had a question.
Mirza had a question.
Okay. I'm sorry, who did? Mirza.
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, can I?
Sure.
Yes. Please.
Hey, so in my, in one of my recent interview, there were multiple Che people, how to keep them engaging when, multiple people are asking the questions. So I always ask the time, there were operational based questions, situational based question. I always ask them to give me some time to rethink and give them the articulate, to my to communicate it in a correct way. But the problem was what I felt is I don't know. I was able to keep them all engaged. It's interview is nothing but more of like communicating with everyone. So I felt I was able to speak with one person but not with the other. So
Hmm.
what is the
Are you talking, Mirza, are you talking about a group interview? Like if you did a panel interview?
yeah, that was kind of that. Yeah.
You could, if they have, if only one person has been leading the interview, and they say, well, what questions do you have for me at the end? You can say, well, actually, like, let's just say, Payush and Jim were part of your panel, and maybe William. And you could say, actually, I was wondering, Payush, I haven't heard much from you. Did you have any questions for me? You know, so you could actually engage them right there in the interview towards the end. And that's one of the ways that you could do it. Sometimes people are shadowing. They're new interviewers, and so they're there more to listen and to watch and to learn, and they're not there so much to necessarily ask themselves. But usually they're introduced that way, and some people are just shy. So I would engage them by asking them a question, or you may say, well, William, I haven't really talked to you much yet. Can you tell me, what do you love about this job? And then listen to them, and then that will help you engage with that person. Does that help? Or was there more to the question?
I mean, well, you are at the interview. You feel that, whenever he asks a question, he feel, I mean, after, a single person asking 4 questions, and the 5th questions from his side, and, there is the voice modulation. I mean, you can hear that monotone. Yeah. And you understand that, no, this is, there is something is wrong, so.
Yeah, actually, you just, the answer is going to be a little bigger than what you're asking, Mirza, because he just reminded me of something. So when you're in an interview, and this is any interview, and you feel like on the other side, you're not connecting to them or they're not engaging with you, I would just stop the interview and just say, I get the feeling, and I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong or what it is, but I just get the feeling that you're not that interested in what I'm saying. So I just wanted to stop right now and just ask, is there anything I've done incorrectly that, or anything, is there anything that you wanted to ask me or talk about before we continue? So just letting them know you feel that tension or you feel that weird space. And sometimes people will say, oh, wow, I'm so sorry. I've been trying to cover it up, but my dog just died this morning, and I keep thinking about my dog, and I didn't mean it to impact the interview. No, you're doing great, Mirza. I'm so sorry that I let that get there. But it gives them a chance to say something. And a lot of times it's nothing to do with you, but if you don't bring it up, if you don't say, hey, I'm really excited about this opportunity, and I just feel like I'm not sure that we're connecting properly, and I just wanted to find out if there was anything going on or anything I could do so we could connect better. Just bringing it up gives them the opportunity in case they have something going on in the background and they're only half there. A lot of times they will immediately turn that into, they'll give you their undivided attention where they weren't giving it to you before. And sometimes they'll say, I'm so glad you asked. This has been a really rough day. Is it actually okay if we reschedule this? I'm just not able to focus on this right now, and I'm so happy you're excited about the job, and I would like to talk to you when I'm more focused or something. So yeah, just bringing something up in an interview, if you notice a weird space or an awkwardness, actually is beneficial. Yeah.
Right.
Did that help?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. Did you have another question around it?
I
Thank
have, but is it the time allows? I think Dina have some
Oh,
questions.
1 minute. I think William had a question. I'm not sure whether he's in the room.
And yeah, and I haven't been able to read the full chat. Deanna,
Yeah.
I did read yours, and you basically said you haven't filled out a resume online. Is that what you mean? Or like the online things, and you're stressed when you fill it out, or you think you might get stressed? If you have a physical resume, do you have a physical resume, Deanna? You don't? Okay. One of the things that you can do is when you're applying for a job, look at what the job description is and what they're asking, and then if you've done anything in that area, that's like, let's say you've been maybe you've worked at a desk, a front desk job, and you're applying to a front desk job. Then look at the job description to help you understand what were your responsibilities, and remind yourself of what those tasks are. And that's how you can make your resume. And then you make your resume, and then when you do fill out the areas for each position, then you reflect back to those things. But make sure that you're not just like copying the job, that you're actually putting what you did, not just, they're asking for someone who's filed. And then, you put, even if you haven't filed, you don't just put it there. You actually put what you did. Okay. Does that make sense? So I use job descriptions all the time to help me. Even job descriptions my company posts, I'll go back and I'll go, oh yeah, I do that. Oh shoot, why isn't that on my resume? So if they ever post a role that is like my role, I've been here for 10 years, so I haven't really written a resume for 10 years. And so just going back to a job description my company would post would help me remind me of what I'm actually doing. Or what another company posts. So William, what was your question? Or
Question,
was it in the chat? Did you want to?
as mentioned, William mentioned that, can you
I'm not quite hearing you, but let me just see if I can find William's mention in the chat here.
I
Okay.
have just one last question, Anita.
So, okay, can you hold on just a second? I found William's question. So William asked, can you say more about how to end the interview? Usually it's the interviewer that's going to end the interview. Usually they'll wrap it up, or another interviewer will come in. But if you feel like the interview is dragging on, you could just say, well, do you have any other questions for me? This is something I'm really excited about. And, if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them before we wrap up. But usually they're going to be the ones that start ending the interview, and then you would just say, well, thank you so much for the time that you gave me today. This is the kind of opportunity I've been looking for, and I think I could make a valuable contribution. I look forward to the next time we talk. William, did that help? And then Namita, you had another question? I'll let William type another question if he had it.
Yeah, so by any chance you're late for the interview, how can you put it in a professional and polite way? Because it looks really bad when a person is,
Yeah, the second that you know you're late for an interview, you need to communicate with anyone that you can, whether it's, I don't know if you could hear me. The second that you know you're going to be late for an interview, you want to communicate. And even if you know you're going to be late for an interview 15 minutes before, an hour before, and you're still trying to make it happen, but you know you're going to be late, you should mention it. You should let them know ahead of time if you can. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you're driving and you get stuck in traffic or something. You want to try to plan your interviews so that you arrive at least 15 minutes before, or you're prepared 15 minutes before. Even if you don't dial in, make sure that you've done everything that you need to do to be on that interview. One thing that I do for myself is I set alarms, and I'll set depending on the importance or when I have to leave, sometimes I only set a 15-minute alarm before the appointment, a 10-minute alarm, a 3-minute alarm, a 2-minute alarm, and a 1-minute alarm, and that way I'm always on time. And, you know, if there's any question, like I'm driving somewhere and like, what if a car accident happened, I might plan in even a little more time, like a 30-minute buffer. Maybe I plan to arrive 30 to 45 minutes, go find a Starbucks close by so I can grab a tea or a coffee or something, and then I will be there on time, and I make sure that I get there at least 15 minutes before. All right. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to put my email in the chat in case you have questions that you want to follow up with me on later. This is my email. I'm also going to put my cell phone number in the chat. If you happen to be out of the country and you want to connect with me, you can connect with me on WhatsApp. I am on WhatsApp. I'm also on Line. I'm also on Signal. Actually, Line I don't really use. So let's just say WhatsApp and Signal. That's my cell phone number. And I'm happy to take questions outside of this meeting. And it was just a pleasure to be with you here tonight. And, you know, again, thank you for your attention, for your questions, for your interest. And I hope my deepest and greatest hope is that what I've shared with you today makes an impact for you and helps you get your next great job.
Thank you, Anita, for a
Thank you
wonderful
so much,
session.
Anita.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So I'll just stay on as you guys hop off. I'll stay on for a few more minutes in case someone had a question that they think of, but I think we can call this complete.
Thank you very much. Thank you all who have stayed back so late and have your questions clarified them. Keep joining us. Interpersonal Toastmasters is where you improve yourself and become a better version of yourself. Thank you and keep joining every week. We do meet every week, Thursday, 6:30 p.m. PST.
Awesome. Awesome. Yes, and Toastmasters, I do have friends in Toastmasters and they all benefit from it. So great job taking on something in your own spare time that will help you in your personal and professional development.
Thank you.
Great. So if you want to be added to our guest group, please let me know by private chat. You leave your email or your WhatsApp number, and we'll do that accordingly. Thank you. Thank you, Anita, one more time. It's a great session, as usual.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It was my pleasure to be with you guys tonight, or for some of you this morning, for some of you this afternoon. But yeah, totally my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.